2020 is a strange year for Macs. Apple announced they'll be switching their silicon from Intel to their own bespoke ARM-based hardware. Despite that, they have continued to release Intel Macs throughout the year, and at the time of this video, they are yet to release any consumer-focused Apple Silicon Macs. Because of this, many people are saying right now is the worst time you could purchase a new Mac, whether it's purchasing an Intel Mac with a lack of clarity of future third-party software support, or even if you wait for the new Apple Silicon Macs, there's always risks to being an early adopter for such a new line of hardware. This might mean you need to hold on to your pre-existing hardware for a bit longer than intended, or even purchase an older Mac to hold you over till the Mac landscape is more clear. I don't necessarily agree it's such a bad time to buy a new Mac, but I do believe in trying to make hardware last as long as possible. Hey everyone, my name's Jack. I'm a designer and video maker living in London, and today I'm going to be answering, can you use a 5-year-old MacBook in 2020? So I've been using this 13-inch Retina MacBook Pro since the start of 2015, and I've used it pretty much every day. That's for creative tasks, general admin, studies, work. But 5 years is an extremely long time in technology, so how does it stand up in 2020? I'm going to be discussing aspects such as software, hardware, performance, battery life, and I'll be bookmarking all of those sections in the description, so if there's a specific aspect about using a 5-year-old MacBook in 2020 that you want to know about, then just use the timestamps and it will take you to that point in the video. The hardware of the 2015 MacBook Pro has stood the test of time. The silver aluminium unibody design still looks and feels as premium as the day it was released. There has been no loss of tension in the screen hinge, and all the feet on the bottom remain in place. It may not be as light or thin as the latest MacBook Pros, especially the 15-inch model, but it still is no stress to carry around in a backpack all day. One feature of the 2015 MacBook Pro that is missing in modern laptops is the light-up Apple logo. This no longer fits in Apple's design language, however I was always a big fan of the look, and it definitely always made Apple laptops a bit more noticeable in coffee shops than PCs. The ports is one of the best parts in having an older MacBook. This specific model features a MagSafe port, 2 Thunderbolt ports, 1 USB-A port and a headphone port on the left, as well as another USB-A port, HDMI and a full-sized SD card reader on the right. As you more than likely know, modern MacBooks feature only USB-C ports and a headphone port, meaning that if you want to use an SD card or plug your MacBook into most monitors, you'll need some form of adapter or dongle. The lack of USB-C does mean that you can't achieve a minimal one cable setup, and you also don't get the same transfer speeds on an external SSD with just USB-A. Overall, I must say having a range of ports instead of just USB-C is preferred. So the screen of the MacBook is 13 inches with a resolution of 2560 by 1600. That's actually identical to the 2020 model of the 13-inch MacBook Pro. So in terms of resolution, there's actually been no change over the last 5 years. One thing that has changed quite a lot though is color and brightness. The 2015 MacBook Pro is just not as bright as the 2020 model. It has a brightness of 300 nits compared to 500 nits on the new models. It also doesn't feature the P3 wide color gamut or the True Tone color technology that the 2020 models have, so the color accuracy has improved quite significantly over the past 5 years. I personally haven't found any issues though with the brightness or colours of this screen. Most of the creative work I do is on an external monitor. However, when I have done creative work that requires colour accuracy, this display has been fine with me. Also, going between this and the newer 15-inch Retina MacBook Pro that I use for work, I do notice that the 15-inch laptop has a brighter screen. However, I rarely take advantage of that brighter screen. I prefer to have the settings a bit lower just to reduce eye strain. So when it comes to this screen, I don't think there's any issues using this laptop in 2020. Apple had a bad few years when it came to keyboards, but fortunately this model came just before that change. The keys have plenty of travel and it's generally just a great typing experience. I haven't tried the 2020 MacBook Pros with the new Apple Magic Keyboard, so I can't comment on how it compares to them. However, I can say it is definitely a lot nicer to type on than the 2018 MacBook Pro I use for work, which features the widely hated butterfly mechanism. The trackpad is still great, it hasn't got any less responsive, and the vibration motors haven't noticeably worn out at all. The trackpad is quite a bit smaller than what you'd find on new Macs, which some may find not as useful or enjoyable. However, for me, going between a newer 15-inch MacBook Pro and my 2015 MacBook Pro, it isn't something that bothers me. Moving on to the internals of the Mac, it features a 2.7 GHz Intel Core i5 processor, 8GB of DDR3 RAM, 256GB of SSD storage, and Intel Iris 6100 integrated graphics. These specs, even by today's standard, aren't terrible. Buying a computer now, you'd hope for a bit more than 8GB of RAM and 256GB of storage, but both are still usable. Having an SSD has definitely increased the life of this computer. Even though it's not an NVMe SSD which is standard today, it's still very fast to boot and load applications. Right, so now we're done with hardware, let's get into the software. This MacBook still runs the latest version of macOS, which at the time of recording is macOS Catalina. macOS Catalina actually is supported on MacBook Pros all the way back to 2012, so I imagine the upcoming update for macOS Big Sur will definitely feature on this laptop. It would be very strange of Apple to remove 3 years of compatibility in one software update, so I do think this laptop will be supported for many years to come by Apple. In terms of compatibility with software and applications, I haven't found any that haven't worked on this laptop. The main ones for me being the Adobe suites, they all work absolutely fine on here. I think when it comes to software, people expect their MacBook to get software updates for a long time, and that's just true about Apple devices in general and is one of the main selling points of getting an Apple device. In my next video, I'll be talking about Google's support for software with Android phones, especially focusing on Pixel phones, which unfortunately isn't as good as Apple's support. So if you're interested in that video, make sure to click the subscribe button if you don't want to miss out. Whether the performance is good enough in 2020 really comes down to what you use your MacBook for. My personal usage on this laptop involves a lot of web-based work, as well as some wireframing in Figma and design work in Photoshop and Illustrator, all of which it can handle fine. I've recently stopped video editing on this, as larger projects even in 1080p really slow the machine down and the preview will start to lag on Premiere Pro. If all that you need to accomplish is web-based, then you'll never have any issues. This laptop performs great. If you want to push it a bit further with photo editing on Lightroom, design work on Photoshop or Illustrator, or even some light video editing with Final Cut, then you should be fine. But if you're going to be editing huge Photoshop files, editing video in 4K on Premiere Pro or After Effects, or even really trying any kind of 3D work, this computer will really struggle. This is mainly down to only having 8GB of RAM, as well as the relatively old Intel Core i5 processor. I still think this performance is probably better than most people would expect of a computer this age, and considering what you can buy this for, which I'll discuss shortly, it will still be a great computer for most people. Battery life is probably the biggest issue with using a 5-year-old MacBook in 2020. It's completely normal for batteries to age over this length of time, and to be honest, compared to a lot of other devices, the battery has lasted really well in this. It's lost roughly 18% in capacity, going from 6,559 mAh down to 5,361. In the 5 years I've had it, it's had 654 battery cycles, and Apple do quote the maximum for these batteries to be about 1,000, so from that you can assume the battery has a good few more years of life left in it. I would say even though the battery capacity has reduced by 18%, the battery life has probably reduced by more. When I originally got this laptop, it could last anywhere between kind of 5 to 10 hours depending on usage. However, even if I'm just doing kind of general web browsing, I rarely get more than 5 hours of battery. And if I'm using creative applications such as Photoshop or Premiere Pro, then I'd be lucky to get more than an hour or two of battery on it. One solution to this problem would be just to replace the battery, which is definitely a reasonable thing to do after 5 years, especially if you want to keep using it for a few more. I personally don't think I'll be doing that, as at the moment I'm not traveling a lot, therefore I'm usually near a plug, so battery life isn't that important to me. So overall on battery life, it has got significantly worse over the 5 years of using it, and definitely won't be as good as what you can buy in 2020. However, it is still very much usable. So now let's talk about price. So if you already own a 13-inch MacBook Pro from 2015 and you're looking to sell it, or if you're now, after watching this video, interested in buying one, on eBay in the UK, the model I have here, which has 256GB of storage, goes for around £350 to £400. Considering it's 5 years old and the original price was probably around £1,200, then you have to say it's actually held its value pretty well, which is normal for Apple products. Another option to selling your device on eBay is to actually go through Apple directly and trade in your laptop when buying a new one. The amount that Apple would offer me for trading this in is about £190, so that's half of what I could get on eBay. I know which option I'll pick when I eventually sell it. I'd much rather get more value than the convenience. However, the Apple trade-in program is great and super easy, and if you don't really need that £200 and saving time is more important than trading it in is always a good option. But it's still interesting to see that the consumer market actually values this laptop twice as much as Apple does at this point in time. So, can you use a 5-year-old MacBook in 2020? I'd say absolutely. If you're a creative, yes, you will come up against some performance issues and you might get frustrated once in a while. And if you travel a lot, the battery life isn't so great. But it's still very much a usable machine, especially if a lot of your usage is web-based. And for me personally, I think I can continue using this as my main personal device for at least another year. So that just about wraps up this video. If there's any other aspects about using a 5-year-old MacBook in 2020 that you want to know about, feel free to ask about them in the comments and I'll make sure to get back to you. If you want to see more videos like this from me, then you should click the subscribe button and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.